They say memory is what makes us who we are, but what happens when the people you love most decide your memories are broken beyond repair and use that as an excuse to throw you away like yesterday's garbage? My name is Margaret. I am 78 years old, and my daughter Emily told everyone I was losing my mind just so she could take control of my life, my money, and my dignity. She stood in front of me 3 months ago with her perfectly manicured nails and her designer handbag and told me I was too senile to manage my own affairs anymore, that I needed to sign over power of attorney, that it was for my own good. But what she did not know, what she could never have imagined in her worst nightmare, was that I had been watching her, documenting everything, and I was about to prove to everyone exactly who the crazy one really was. I want you to imagine something with me right now. Imagine waking up in your own home, the home where you raised your children, where you celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where you mourned your husband, and having your own daughter walk through that door and look at you like you are a stranger, not with love, not with concern, but with calculation, with assessment, with the cold eyes of someone measuring the value of an asset they are about to acquire. That is what happened to me. That is what I saw in Emily's face every single time she visited over the past 6 months. And if you have ever felt that same chill run down your spine when someone you trusted looks at you differently, when someone you love stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a problem to be solved or a resource to be managed, then you know exactly what I am talking about. You know that particular flavor of betrayal that tastes like metal in your mouth and sits heavy in your stomach like a stone. You know that feeling when someone looks at you like you are already gone, like you are just a shell of the person you used to be, when they speak slowly and loudly, as if volume could somehow penetrate the fog they assume has settled over your brain. That is how my own daughter started looking at me 6 months ago. It began with small comments, little observations she would make in front of her husband, in front of my grandchildren, in front of anyone who would listen. She would say things like, "Mom forgot where she put her keys again," or "Mom asked me the same question twice today." And each time she said it, her voice would carry this mixture of concern and satisfaction, as if she were sad about my decline, but also somehow pleased to be the one documenting it, the dutiful daughter bearing witness to her mother's deterioration. The first time she did it, we were at Sunday dinner, all of us gathered around the table the way we had been doing for years. I had asked her something about her son's soccer schedule because I wanted to attend his next game, and Emily looked at David with this expression, this knowing glance that said, "Here we go again," and then she turned to me with exaggerated patience and said, "Mom, we talked about this last week, remember?" And I knew we had not talked about it last week because I keep a calendar and there was nothing written down about any conversation about soccer. But everyone at that table saw her look, heard her tone, and I could see them all making mental notes. Poor Margaret, getting forgetful. Poor Emily, having to deal with this. It was a performance, carefully staged, and I was the unwitting star of a show I never auditioned for. But here is what Emily did not know. I have always been the kind of woman who pays attention. My late husband Richard used to joke that I could remember a conversation from 20 years ago, word for word, that I never forgot a face or a name or a slight. Some people thought it was a blessing, others thought it was a curse, but it was simply who I was. I noticed things. I remembered things. Richard would laugh and tell people that I had a mind like a steel trap, that you could not get anything past me, that I noticed when he moved a book from one shelf to another, or when he changed the route he took to work. He said it with love, with admiration, even though sometimes my attention to detail drove him crazy. I remember one time early in our marriage when he tried to surprise me with a birthday party, and I figured it out 3 weeks in advance because I noticed he had been making mysterious phone calls and hiding receipts, and our friend Susan had been acting strange whenever I mentioned my birthday. Richard was devastated that I had ruined the surprise, but also grudgingly impressed that I had pieced it all together from such small clues. That is who I am. That is who I have always been. A woman who sees what is really happening beneath the surface of things. And when my daughter started her campaign to paint me as senile, I noticed that too. I noticed every single manipulative move she made. I noticed how she would move my reading glasses when she came to visit, and then act concerned when I could not find them. I noticed how she would ask me questions about things we had never discussed, and then tell others I was confused when I did not know the answers. I noticed how she started bringing her lawyer husband to our Sunday dinners, and how they would exchange meaningful glances when I spoke. Every look, every comment, every staged incident of my supposed forgetfulness, I saw it all with perfect clarity. so I started my own documentation. I bought a small notebook, the kind with a flower pattern on the cover that looks innocent and harmless, and I began writing down every interaction, every visit, every phone call. I wrote down the date and time when Emily moved my medication bottles from the kitchen counter to the bathroom cabinet, and then called me in a panic an hour later, asking if I had taken my pills, her voice dripping with manufactured worry. I wrote down when she rearranged my photo albums and then suggested I was getting confused about family history when I mentioned they were out of order. I wrote down every single trap she laid for me, every piece of evidence she tried to manufacture of my supposed cognitive decline. I became meticulous about it. Every entry in that flower-covered notebook included the date, the time, who was present, what was said, what was done. I wrote down when Emily called my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, and told her she was worried about me living alone. Could Mrs. Henderson please keep an eye on me and report back if she noticed anything concerning? I found out about that call because Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, came directly to me and told me what Emily had said, and she looked me in the eyes and said, "Margaret, I have known you for 15 years, and there is nothing wrong with your mind. What is your daughter playing at?" I wrote that down too. I documented when Emily showed up unannounced and went through my mail, claiming she was just trying to help me organize, but really she was looking for bills she could point to as evidence I was not managing my finances properly. She did not know I had already paid all those bills online, that the paper statements sitting on my desk were just duplicates I kept for my records. I wrote it all down. The first time she brought up the idea of me signing over power of attorney, I was sitting in my favorite chair, the green velvet one Richard and I bought on our 30th anniversary, drinking tea from the china cup my mother gave me on my wedding day. Emily perched on the edge of the sofa, her spine straight, her expression a practiced blend of concern and determination. She told me she had been talking to her husband, that they both agreed I needed help managing my affairs, that it was getting too complicated for someone my age, that there was no shame in accepting assistance. The way she said it, the tone she used, it was like she was talking to a child, like I was 5 years old and she was explaining why I could not have candy before dinner. I looked at her across my living room, this woman I had carried in my body for 9 months, this child I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I saw a stranger. I saw someone who had calculated the value of my home, my savings, my investments, and decided it was time to take control. I remember every detail of that conversation. The afternoon sun was coming through the window behind her, making her hair glow like a halo, which felt like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and navy pants, expensive clothes that she could not really afford, and I remember thinking even then that she was spending money she did not have, living a life that was stretched too thin. She had this folder with her, professional looking, and she pulled out documents that she said were just preliminary paperwork, nothing binding, just something for me to look over. She slid them across the coffee table toward me like she was doing me a favor, like she was offering me a life raft instead of trying to push me overboard. I told her I would think about it. She did not like that answer. Over the next few weeks, the incidents escalated. Suddenly, I was forgetting appointments I never made. Emily would call me and say, "Mom, you missed your dentist appointment today. Did you forget?" And I would check my calendar, and there was no dentist appointment written down anywhere because I had not made one. Or she would tell people I had agreed to meet her for lunch and never showed up, when in reality, she had never asked me to lunch at all. Suddenly, I was saying things I never said. She would tell her husband and her friends that I had repeated the same story 3 times in one visit, or that I had asked her the same question over and over, conversations that never actually happened, but that she reported as fact. Suddenly, neighbors were expressing concern about my well-being based on conversations Emily claimed to have had with them, conversations I later discovered never happened or had been completely misrepresented. One particularly insidious incident involved my longtime friend Barbara. Emily called Barbara and told her she was worried about me, that I had seemed confused lately, that I had mentioned not recognizing my own neighborhood when I went for walks. Barbara, concerned for me, mentioned this to another friend, and within a week half my social circle was looking at me with pity and concern. The problem was, I never said any such thing to Emily. I never told her I was confused about my neighborhood. I have lived in this same house for 42 years. I could navigate these streets with my eyes closed. But Emily had planted that seed of doubt, and it grew and spread like a weed through my community. When I finally found out about it and confronted Barbara, asking her where she had heard such nonsense, she looked uncomfortable and admitted Emily had called her. That went in my notebook too. with the date and time and exactly what Barbara told me Emily had said. She was building a case, creating a narrative, constructing a prison of supposed dementia around me brick by brick. And with each brick she laid, I wrote it down in my flower-covered notebook. If you are watching this right now and you have ever felt dismissed by someone you love, if you have ever had your reality questioned by people who are supposed to protect you, if you have ever been treated like you are less than you are simply because of your age or your vulnerability, I want you to know you are not alone. Before we go any further in this story, I need you to do something for me and for everyone else who has felt this same crushing weight. I need you to pause this video right now and leave a comment saying, "I see you and your truth matters." Just those 6 words. I see you and your trust matters. Because when you write those words, you are not just speaking to me. You are speaking to every person watching this who has been gaslit by someone they trusted, who has been told their memory and their perception cannot be relied upon, who has been made to feel invisible in their own life. Your comment becomes part of a chorus of voices that says, "We will not be erased, we will not be diminished, we will not let others write our stories for us." So please, take a moment, scroll down, and type, "I see you and your truth matters." Let us build something beautiful together right here, right now. A community of people who refuse to be silenced. I will wait. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. Emily showed up at my house unannounced with her husband David and another man I had never met before. She introduced him as Dr. Harrison, a geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in cognitive assessment. She told me she had made an appointment for me, that it was just a routine evaluation, that there was nothing to worry about. But I saw the folder in David's briefcase. I saw the papers they were carrying. I saw the way they positioned themselves between me and the door, as if I might try to run. This was not a wellness check. This was an ambush. Dr. Harrison was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes that made his participation in this charade all the more offensive. He had one of those gentle voices that doctors use when they think you are fragile, when they think you need to be handled with care. He asked me to sit down and then began his questions. What year is it? Who is the president? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? Simple questions, the kind designed to establish baseline cognitive function. I answered each one perfectly, my voice steady and clear, watching Emily's face fall slightly with each correct response. What year is it? 2024, I told him. Who is the president? I named the current president without hesitation. Count backward from 100 by sevens. I rattled off 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65, and I could have kept going, but he stopped me and made a note on his clipboard. Then he moved to memory tests. He gave me a list of words to remember, 5 random words: apple, table, penny, jacket, arrow, and told me he would ask me to recall them later. He told me a short story about a woman who went to the grocery store and bought milk, bread, and eggs, then came home and made breakfast for her grandchildren. He asked me to repeat it back, and I did, word for word, adding details about how the woman had forgotten her shopping list, but remembered everything anyway, because she had been buying the same items for years. He showed me pictures, a dog, a house, a tree, a car, told me to study them, then put them away. Every single test I completed perfectly. I could see the frustration building behind Emily's professionally concerned expression. But here is where it got interesting. After the formal assessment, Dr. Harrison started asking about my daily life, my routines, my ability to manage household tasks. And this is when Emily jumped in. She started telling him about incidents I had no recollection of because they never happened. She described a time I left the stove on and nearly started a fire, providing specific details about how she had smelled smoke when she came to visit, how she had found a pot burned black on the burner, how I had been in the living room completely unaware of the danger, except I have not used my stove in weeks because I had been eating the meals from the senior center down the street, nutritious pre-prepared food that I just heated in the microwave. My stove was spotless, the burners clean, no evidence of any fire or burned pot anywhere. She talked about how I got lost driving to the grocery store I had been shopping at for 40 years, how I had called her in tears from a parking lot 3 towns away, completely disoriented and scared. Except I stopped driving 6 months ago by choice, not because I was incapable, but because I decided I did not want to deal with traffic and parking anymore, and I had been using a delivery service ever since. My car was sitting in my garage with dust on the windshield. The last time I had driven it was in September, to my annual physical where my doctor had complimented me on my excellent health and sharp mind. Emily described incidents of me forgetting to take my medication, mixing up my pills, taking the wrong dosages at the wrong times. She talked about finding my daily pill organizer still full at the end of the week, evidence that I was not keeping track of my prescriptions. Except I had a system, a meticulous system, where I filled my pill organizer every Sunday night and kept a chart on my refrigerator where I checked off each dose. I could show Dr. Harrison that chart right now. 3 months worth of check marks, every single medication taken exactly as prescribed. She painted a picture of a woman in crisis, a woman who was a danger to herself and others, a woman who needed immediate intervention, and she did it all while sitting in my living room, performing concern, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, reaching for her husband's hand as if the weight of caring for her declining mother was almost too much to bear. I sat there listening to my daughter lie to a medical professional about me while I was right there in the room. I watched her perform concern, watched her dab at dry eyes with a tissue, watched her reach for her husband's hand as if the weight of caring for her declining mother was almost too much to bear, and I let her talk. I let her dig her hole deeper and deeper, because I had my flower-covered notebook, I had my documentation, I had my proof, and I was not done gathering evidence yet. Dr. Harrison recommended further evaluation. He suggested I might benefit from assisted living, from having someone check on me regularly, from perhaps considering a more supervised environment. Emily nodded eagerly, already pulling out brochures for expensive memory care facilities, places that cost $15,000 a month, places that would drain my savings in a matter of years. I told them all I would consider their recommendations, and that I needed some time to process everything. Emily's jaw tightened, but she smiled that tight smile she always used when she was not getting her way fast enough. After they left, I sat in my green velvet chair for a long time. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the same clock that had marked time through Richard's illness, through the empty years after his death, through every moment of my grief and my healing. I thought about what Emily was trying to do. I thought about the life she was attempting to take from me. I thought about how many other elderly people were going through this same nightmare with their own children, their own family members, people who saw dollar signs instead of human beings, inheritance instead of parents. And I decided I was not going to let her win. The sun was setting outside my window, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the same sky Richard and I used to watch together from this very chair. He would have been horrified by what Emily was doing. He would have been heartbroken. Richard always thought the best of people, always wanted to believe in their goodness, but even he would have seen through this manipulation. I could almost hear his voice in my head, telling me to fight back, telling me not to let anyone take advantage of me, telling me I was stronger than I thought I was. So I made a decision right there in that chair. I was going to beat Emily at her own game. I was going to prove beyond any shadow of doubt that I was completely competent, completely capable, and completely aware of exactly what she was trying to do. I called my own lawyer the next morning. His name is Robert Chen, and he has been handling my affairs since Richard died. Robert is in his 60s, meticulous, thorough, the kind of lawyer who thinks 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I told him everything. I showed him my notebook with months of documentation, every entry carefully dated and detailed. I explained Emily's campaign to have me declared incompetent, her manufactured evidence, her lies to Dr. Harrison, the way she was systematically destroying my reputation in the community. Robert listened carefully, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. He asked me about specific incidents, wanted to know if I had any witnesses, any proof beyond my own records. I told him about Mrs. Henderson, about Barbara, about the senior center staff who could testify that I was sharp and engaged and completely competent. I told him about my medication chart, my delivery service account, my online banking records that showed I was managing my finances perfectly well. Then he asked me a question that changed everything. He asked me if I knew exactly how much money was at stake. I told him I had a rough idea. My house, which Richard and I had bought for $75,000 in 1982, and which was now worth close to $600,000 in our appreciating neighborhood. My savings, about $200,000 from years of careful budgeting and modest living. Richard's life insurance, which had paid out $150,000 when he died. Some investments, maybe another $100,000, maybe $1 million total, I told Robert. He shook his head slowly, that gesture lawyers make when they know something you do not. Robert shook his head. He pulled out a folder and showed me documents I had signed years ago, investments Richard had made that had grown substantially, property I had forgotten I owned. There was a small commercial building Richard had purchased in 1995 as an investment, something I barely remembered because he handled all of that, and it was now worth almost $800,000 and generated rental income every month that went directly into an account I rarely looked at. There were stocks Richard had bought in the early 2000s, tech companies I had never heard of, that had split and grown and multiplied into holdings worth over $1 million. There was a life insurance policy I did not know existed, a second policy Richard had taken out through his company that would pay out another $500,000 to his estate. There was the house, the savings, the original investments I knew about. The total value of my estate was not $1 million. It was closer to $4 million. $4 million. I stared at the number on the paper Robert showed me, and I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. $4 million. That is what my daughter saw when she looked at me. That is what all of this was about. Not my well-being, not my safety, not concern for my health. $4 million and the control that came with it. Robert explained that if Emily succeeded in getting me declared incompetent and obtained power of attorney, she would have complete control over all of it. She could sell my house out from under me, place me in the cheapest memory care facility she could find, one that cost $3,000 or $4,000 a month instead of the $15,000 a month places she had been showing me brochures for, and pocket the difference. She could liquidate my investments, access my accounts, make any financial decision she wanted without my input or approval. I would have no say, no control, no ability to fight back. I would be completely at her mercy, unless we acted first. Robert suggested we conduct our own cognitive evaluation with an independent specialist, someone with no connection to Emily or her husband. We arranged for a comprehensive assessment at a major hospital 2 hours away, where nobody knew my family. The appointment was scheduled for the following week, and Robert advised me to get a good night's sleep beforehand, to be well rested and alert. I spent 6 hours with neurologists, psychologists, taking every test they could throw at me. Memory tests, where they showed me lists of 30 words and asked me to recall them an hour later. Reasoning tests, where they presented complex problems and asked me to work through the logic. Problem-solving tasks that involved patterns and sequences and spatial relationships. Physical examinations to check my reflexes, my coordination, my motor skills. Brain scans, MRI imaging that showed every fold and wrinkle of my brain in stunning detail, looking for any signs of atrophy or abnormality. They tested me in ways Dr. Harrison never even approached. They asked me to draw a clock showing a specific time, to copy complex geometric shapes, to name as many animals as I could in 60 seconds. They tested my ability to plan and organize by having me arrange colored blocks in specific patterns. They evaluated my language skills by asking me to name obscure objects and explain the meanings of proverbs. They assessed my judgment by presenting hypothetical scenarios and asking what I would do. Every test was thorough, comprehensive, designed to catch even the slightest hint of cognitive impairment. And when the results came back 2 weeks later, they were definitive. I had the cognitive function of someone 20 years younger. My memory was exceptional, scoring in the 98th percentile for my age group. I showed no signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any form of cognitive impairment. The neurologist told me I was sharper than most 50-year-olds he evaluated. I had those results notarized, certified, documented in triplicate, but I still was not ready to confront Emily. I wanted more. I wanted to catch her in the act of her deception so thoroughly that she could never deny it, never explain it away, never paint herself as the concerned daughter just trying to help her ailing mother. So I set a trap. I called Emily 3 days after I got my cognitive evaluation results back. I put on my best confused elderly woman voice, made myself sound uncertain and vulnerable. I told her I had been thinking about what she said, about how maybe I did need help, about how maybe she was right, and I was not managing as well as I thought I was. I could hear the triumph in her voice even though she tried to hide it. The relief that flooded through the phone line was almost palpable. Finally, her mother was seeing reason. Finally, she was going to get what she wanted. I told Emily I had thought about everything, and I was ready to sign the power of attorney documents. The relief that flooded her face was almost comical. She practically glowed with triumph. We set a date for the signing, scheduled for 2 weeks out. She wanted to do it at her house with David present as a witness and another lawyer friend of theirs to notarize. I agreed to everything. Sweet, compliant, confused old Mother Margaret, finally seeing reason, finally accepting help. She even hugged me when she left that day, told me she was so proud of me for being brave enough to accept assistance, told me this was the best decision for everyone. I hugged her back, and I thought about all the times I had held her when she was small, all the scraped knees I had bandaged, all the nightmares I had chased away, all the times I had protected her from the world, and now here she was, ready to rob me blind. During those 2 weeks, I made my own preparations. Robert helped me draft new documents, legal protections, a trust that would preserve my assets and ensure they could never be touched by anyone trying to manipulate me. The trust was ironclad, set up in such a way that even if someone managed to get power of attorney over me, they still could not access the funds. We recorded video testimony of me explaining the situation, proving my competence, stating clearly that I was of sound mind and understood completely what I was doing. In the video, I sat in Robert's office, dressed professionally, and I spoke directly to the camera about Emily's manipulation, about the lies she had told, about the evidence she had manufactured. I explained that I was creating this record to protect myself and to make sure that if anyone ever tried to claim I was incompetent, there would be undeniable proof of my mental state at this moment in time. We gathered every piece of evidence Emily had manufactured, every witness who could testify to her manipulation, every receipt and timeline that proved her lies. Mrs. Henderson agreed to provide a written statement about Emily's phone call and her observations of my completely normal behavior. Barbara wrote a letter describing how Emily had lied about my confusion regarding my neighborhood. The staff at the senior center provided documentation of my regular participation in activities, my sharp contributions to discussions, my clear and organized communication. My doctor wrote a detailed letter confirming my excellent health and cognitive function. We built a case that was absolutely ironclad, and then we waited. The day of the signing arrived. I dressed carefully that morning, putting on my best dress, the navy blue one with the pearl buttons that Richard always said made me look dignified. I did my hair the way I used to do it for important occasions, swept back in an elegant twist. I put on lipstick, a soft pink shade that made me look healthy and vibrant. I made sure I looked exactly like what I was, a competent woman in full control of her faculties. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought about all the battles I had fought in my life, all the challenges I had overcome, and I told myself that this was just one more. I drove to Emily's house, the house I had helped her and David buy with a substantial loan they never fully paid back, and I parked in the driveway and sat in my car for a moment, gathering my strength. Then I walked up to that door, carrying my large purse that held something Emily was not expecting. The purse was heavy, weighted down with all my documentation, my flower-covered notebook, the medical evaluation from the hospital, the video testimony on a flash drive, the legal documents Robert had prepared, my phone with the recorded conversations, every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past months. I felt like I was going into battle, and in a way, I was. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when I would reveal the truth and take back control of my life. She greeted me with that false warmth she had perfected, ushering me inside where David and their lawyer friend Mark were waiting. The documents were laid out on the dining room table, everything ready for my signature. There were multiple copies, everything organized and professional looking. A pen sat next to the papers, expensive looking, probably bought special for this occasion. Emily started explaining what I would be signing, using small words and a patronizing tone, as if I could not possibly understand legal terminology. She went through each document, pointing to the signature lines, explaining how this one gave her control of my financial accounts, how this one allowed her to make medical decisions for me, how this one let her sell my property if she deemed it necessary for my care. I let her talk. I let her explain how she would be managing my money now, how she would make sure all my bills were paid, how I would not have to worry about anything anymore. She made it sound like she was doing me the greatest favor in the world, like I should be grateful that she was willing to take on this burden. David sat there nodding along, adding comments here and there about how this was really the best thing for everyone. how it would give me peace of mind, how I could just relax and enjoy my retirement without all the stress of managing finances and healthcare decisions. Mark the notary started his spiel about how he needed to verify I understood what I was signing and that I was doing so of my own free will, that this was standard procedure, that he just needed to ask me a few questions to confirm my competency to enter into this agreement. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I reached into my purse and pulled out my flower-covered notebook. I opened it to the first page, and I started reading. I read out loud every single thing Emily had done over the past 6 months. Every manipulation, every lie, every manufactured incident. I read the dates and times. I read descriptions of her moving my things and then acting concerned when I could not find them. I read about the fake doctor's visit and the lies she told Dr. Harrison while I sat right there in the room. I read about her calls to my friends and neighbors, spreading false information about my mental state. I read about her going through my mail, her staged incidents, her calculated campaign to destroy my reputation and make me appear incompetent. My voice was steady as I read. I did not rush. I made sure every word was clear, every date was precise, every detail was accurate. I watched Emily's face as I read entry after entry, watched the color drain from her cheeks, watched her eyes widen with each new revelation. March 15th, 3 p.m. Emily moved my reading glasses from the side table to the kitchen counter, then called at 4 p.m. expressing concern that I could not find them. March 22nd, 11 a.m. Emily asked me about a lunch date we supposedly had planned, claimed I had forgotten. No such date was ever discussed. April 3rd, 2 p.m. Emily rearranged my photo albums, later suggested I was confused about family chronology when I mentioned they were out of order. Emily's face went white. David stood up so fast his chair fell over backwards, clattering against the hardwood floor. Mark the notary looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, his professional demeanor crumbling as he realized he had almost been complicit in elder abuse. But I was not done. I pulled out the medical evaluation from the hospital, the one that proved my cognitive function was exceptional. I placed it on the table next to the power of attorney documents Emily wanted me to sign. The contrast was stark. Her documents that would give her control of everything, my documents that proved I needed no such control. I let them all look at the evaluation, at the test scores that put me in the 98th percentile, at the neurologist's statement that I showed no signs of any cognitive impairment whatsoever. Then I pulled out my phone, and I played a recording. I had been recording our conversations for the past month, completely legal in our state as long as one party consents, and I had caught Emily on tape talking to David about what they would do with my money once they had control of it. Her voice came through the phone speaker clear as day. I had her discussing which of my possessions they would sell first. I had her laughing about how easy it had been to convince people I was losing my mind. I had her calculating how much money they could extract from my estate, how they could put me in a cheap facility and keep the difference for themselves. The recording played in that silent dining room, and every word was another nail in the coffin of her deception. The silence in that room was deafening. Emily could not speak. She opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. David looked like he might be sick. Mark quietly started packing up his notary supplies, clearly wanting to be anywhere but there. I stood up, and I looked my daughter in the eyes. I told her I knew exactly what she had tried to do. I told her I had documentation of everything. I told her that if she ever tried anything like this again, if she ever attempted to have me declared incompetent, if she ever lied about my mental state to anyone, I would take all of this evidence to the police and to every family member and friend we had, and I would make sure everyone knew what kind of person she really was. Then I told her there was one more thing. I reached back into my purse and pulled out a check. It was made out to Emily for $100,000. I had written it that morning, signed it, made it completely legitimate and cashable. She looked at it confused, her brain trying to process what was happening, why I would give her money after everything I had just revealed. I explained that this was her inheritance, the money I had planned to leave her when I died, but I was giving it to her now. I was giving it to her so she could see exactly what her greed and her manipulation had earned her. $100,000 out of a $4 million estate, a fraction of what she had tried to steal, but more money than most people see in a lifetime. I placed the check on the table in front of her. She reached for it slowly, her hand shaking, fingers trembling as they touched the paper. She picked it up, held it up to the light as if checking to make sure it was real, and then she looked at me with this expression I had never seen before, this mixture of shock and realization, and something that might have been shame, or might have been just calculation about what she could buy with that money. $100,000. I watched her eyes move across the numbers, watched her lips move silently as if she was counting the zeros, watched her mind race through all the possibilities. She could pay off debts. She could take that vacation she had been wanting. She could buy a new car, renovate the kitchen, send the kids to better schools. $100,000 was life-changing money for someone drowning in the kind of debt I suspected Emily and David were carrying. I let her pick up that check. I let her hold it in her hands, feel the weight of the paper, see her own name written there in my careful handwriting. I let her see that $100,000, probably imagining all the things she could buy with it, all the bills it could pay, all the wants it could satisfy, all the problems it could solve. For a brief moment, I saw hope flash across her face, this desperate, grasping hope that maybe somehow this was all going to work out okay, that maybe her mother was going to forgive her and hand her this money, and everything would be fine. And then I reached across the table, and I took the check back from her trembling fingers. I held it up in front of her face so she could see it clearly, so close she could read every number, every letter, her name right there as the payee. And then I tore it into tiny pieces. I ripped that check into confetti, and I let the pieces fall on her dining room table like snow, like the ashes of everything she had tried to build on lies and manipulation. Little pieces of paper floating down, each one representing a dream she would never realize, money she would never touch, an inheritance she had gambled away through her own greed and deception. I told her that this was what she got for trying to steal my life from me. Nothing. She would get nothing from me ever again. Not a penny, not an apology, not another chance to hurt me. I was removing her from my will entirely. Everything I had would go to charity, to organizations that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse, to causes that actually mattered instead of to a daughter who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. Emily finally found her voice. She started crying, saying she was sorry, saying she did not mean it, saying I had misunderstood everything, but her tears were as fake as her concern had always been. I picked up my purse and I walked toward the door. David tried to say something, tried to explain or justify or rationalize, but I held up my hand and told him I was not interested in hearing anything either of them had to say. Mark the notary had already disappeared. Smart man. As I reached the front door, Emily called out to me. She said, "Mom, please, we can talk about this. We can work this out." I turned and looked at her one last time. I told her that the saddest part of all of this was not that she had tried to steal from me. It was not even that she had lied about me and tried to destroy my reputation. The saddest part was that she had looked at me and seen someone weak, someone vulnerable, someone whose mind was going and who could be easily manipulated. She had looked at me and seen exactly what she wanted to see instead of who I actually was, and that told me everything I needed to know about who she had become. I walked out of that house, and I have not spoken to my daughter since. That was 3 months ago. She has called. She has sent letters. She has shown up at my door. I have ignored all of it. Some people might think I am being too harsh, that I should forgive her, that family is family, and you have to give people second chances. But those people do not understand what it feels like to have your own child try to erase you while you are still alive. They do not understand the violation of having someone you gave life to treat you like you are already dead and just waiting for the paperwork to make it official. Here is what nobody tells you about getting older. The world starts treating you like you are fading before you are actually gone. People speak over you, make decisions for you, assume you cannot understand or remember or function without help. And when that treatment comes from strangers, it is one thing. But when it comes from your own family, from the people who are supposed to love and protect you, it breaks something fundamental inside of you. Emily did not just try to steal my money. She tried to steal my autonomy, my dignity, my right to exist as a full person. She tried to put me in a box labeled senile and incompetent, and she tried to lock that box and throw away the key, but I refused to get in the box. I want to take a moment here to speak directly to anyone watching this who might be going through something similar, or who might be caring for an elderly parent or relative and feeling overwhelmed. This channel exists as a place where we tell the truth about aging, about family, about the complicated relationships that define our lives. If you have found value in this story, if it has touched something in you or made you think differently about these issues, I would be honored if you would consider subscribing. Not because I am asking for a favor, but because this community we are building together matters. Every week I share stories about the reality of growing older, about the challenges and the betrayals, but also the moments of strength and clarity and unexpected victory. When you subscribe, you are joining a space where we do not pretend everything is easy or simple or fair. We look at the hard truths together, and we support each other through them. There is a subscribe button somewhere on your screen, and clicking it means you will be here for the next story and the one after that. It means you are part of a community that refuses to let age make us invisible. So, if that speaks to you, if you want to be part of this ongoing conversation, please subscribe right now. I promise you, it will be worth it. After I left Emily's house that day, I drove to my lawyer's office and we finalized all the new documents. My estate is now in an ironclad trust that cannot be touched by anyone. I have named Robert Chen as my executor and designated every penny to go to charities that help prevent elder abuse. I have created a healthcare directive that specifies exactly what kind of care I want and who is authorized to make medical decisions for me if I ever become truly incapacitated, and Emily's name is nowhere on any of those documents. I have protected myself in every way possible, and then I did something else. I started volunteering at the senior center, talking to other elderly people about financial abuse, about how to protect themselves, about the warning signs that a family member might be manipulating them. I turned my pain into purpose. You would think that would be the end of the story. You would think that confronting Emily, protecting my assets, and moving on with my life would be enough. But there is something I have not told you yet, something that changes everything you think you understand about this situation. Something I discovered 2 weeks after I walked out of Emily's house with the confetti pieces of that $100,000 check scattered across her dining room table. I was going through some old boxes in my attic, looking for photographs for a project at the senior center, when I found a file folder I did not remember putting there. Inside were medical records from 30 years ago, from when Emily was 17 years old. I almost put them back without reading them, because I thought I knew what they would say. Routine teenage checkup stuff, probably. But something made me open the folder and actually look at the pages, and what I read made my blood run cold. Emily had been diagnosed with a genetic condition when she was 17, something called Huntington's disease. It is a degenerative neurological disorder that typically manifests in middle age, causing progressive breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. It affects movement, cognition, and behavior. It is fatal. There is no cure, and I had completely forgotten this diagnosis existed, not because of dementia or cognitive decline, but because the doctors told us back then that the test results were preliminary, that they needed to do more testing to confirm, and then life got busy and we never followed up. 17-year-old Emily did not want to know for sure, did not want to live under that shadow. So we all agreed to just put it aside and deal with it if symptoms ever appeared. Emily is now 45 years old, the age when Huntington's symptoms typically begin to show. I sat in my attic holding those medical records, and suddenly everything I thought I understood about the past 6 months shifted and blurred and rearranged itself into a completely different picture. I thought about Emily's behavior over the past year, not just her treatment of me, but everything about her. The subtle changes in her personality, the increased irritability, the occasional tremor in her hands that she always dismissed as too much coffee, the way she sometimes seemed to struggle for words or lost her train of thought mid-sentence, things I had attributed to stress or aging or just normal life challenges. What if they were not normal at all? What if they were the beginning stages of the very disease she had spent her whole adult life trying to forget about? I called Robert Chen and asked him to look into something for me. I asked him to find out if Emily had been seeing any doctors recently, if there had been any medical appointments or tests. It took him a week, but he came back with information that confirmed my terrible suspicion. Emily had been diagnosed 6 months ago with early-stage Huntington's disease. She had known for half a year that her brain was beginning the same deterioration that killed her paternal grandmother, that she had maybe 10 to 15 years before the disease robbed her of everything, and she had told no one, not her husband, not her friends, not her mother. Suddenly, her desperate grab for my money made a different kind of horrible sense. She was not just greedy, she was terrified. She was staring down the barrel of a disease that was going to destroy her mind and her body, a disease that was going to require expensive care, a disease that was going to leave her exactly as helpless and dependent as she had tried to make me appear. She needed money, she needed resources, she needed security for the nightmare she knew was coming. And instead of telling me the truth, instead of asking for help, instead of being honest with her mother about her diagnosis and her fear, she decided to paint me as incompetent and steal what I had built over a lifetime. I sat with this knowledge for days. I turned it over and over in my mind like a stone I could not put down. Part of me felt vindicated because her actions were still wrong regardless of her motivation. She still lied about me. She still tried to manipulate and control me. She still manufactured evidence of dementia that did not exist. The ends do not justify the means, and fear is not an excuse for elder abuse. But another part of me, the part that had loved this child before she was born, that had held her through every fever and heartbreak and disappointment of her life, that part of me broke open with a grief so profound I could barely breathe around it. My daughter was dying. Slowly, progressively, inevitably, she was dying. And she was so scared that she had turned into someone I did not recognize. The disease was already affecting her judgment, her impulse control, her ability to think through consequences. Huntington's does not just attack motor function, it attacks the frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and empathy and understanding right from wrong. What if the daughter who had tried to destroy me was not really my daughter at all anymore? What if she was already becoming a victim of the same cruel disease that was stealing her future? I could have kept this knowledge to myself. I could have let Emily live with the consequences of her actions, let her face her diagnosis alone, let her suffer through what was coming without any support from me. I had every right to do that. She had tried to rob me of my autonomy and my dignity. She had lied about me to doctors and lawyers. She had manufactured evidence of mental decline. She had looked me in the eye and pretended to care while plotting to take control of everything I had. In any moral calculation, I would be justified in walking away and never looking back. But I kept thinking about that 17-year-old girl sitting in the doctor's office learning she might carry a gene for a disease that would kill her before she turned 60. I kept thinking about how scared she must have been, how she had chosen to bury that fear instead of facing it, how she had built a life pretending the sword was not hanging over her head, and now the sword was falling and she was trying to grab onto anything that might break her fall, even if it meant hurting the person who loved her most in the world. It did not make what she did right, but it made it human. I called Emily. She answered on the second ring, her voice wary and brittle. I told her I knew about her diagnosis. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her start to cry, real tears this time, not the manufactured kind she had used to manipulate people. She cried like something inside her had finally broken open. She cried like she had been holding back an ocean, and the dam had finally cracked. And I listened to my daughter cry, and I felt my own tears starting because despite everything she had done, despite all the pain and betrayal, she was still my child, and she was suffering. I told her we needed to talk. I told her I was not going to pretend the past 6 months did not happen, that I was not going to act like she had not hurt me, but that I knew now why she had been so desperate and we needed to figure out what to do next. She asked me if I could forgive her. I told her I did not know yet, that forgiveness was not a light switch you could just flip on, but that I was willing to try to understand. We agreed to meet the next day at my house, just the two of us, to have the conversation we should have had 6 months ago. Emily came to my door the next morning, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. The confident, put-together woman who had tried to manipulate me into signing over my power of attorney was gone. In her place was someone frightened and lost and desperately young despite her 45 years. We sat in my living room, me in my green velvet chair and her on the sofa, and she told me everything. She told me about getting the diagnosis, about how the tremors had started small and then got worse, about how she had noticed herself getting confused sometimes or saying things she did not mean. She told me about researching the progression of the disease and realizing she had maybe a decade before she would need full-time care. She told me about the panic that seized her in the middle of the night when she thought about her children having to watch her deteriorate the same way she had watched her grandmother fade away. And then she told me about the plan, about how she and David had been fighting about money, about how they were drowning in debt from trying to maintain a lifestyle they could not afford, about how she had looked at my comfortable life and my comfortable savings and thought that if she could just get control of some of that money, she could secure her own future. She told me how the idea had seemed reasonable at first, how she had convinced herself I was getting forgetful anyway and would be better off with someone managing my affairs, how each small manipulation had led to bigger ones until she was in so deep she could not find her way back to who she used to be. I asked her why she did not just tell me the truth, why she did not come to me and say, "Mom, I am sick and I am scared and I need help." She said she did not know. She said the disease was already affecting her thinking, making her paranoid and impulsive, stealing away the part of her that knew how to reach out for support instead of lashing out in fear. She said she was sorry, over and over again, and I could see she meant it. But sorry does not undo what was done. Sorry does not give me back the months of feeling betrayed by my own child. Sorry does not erase the lies or the manipulation or the violation of trust. We talked for hours that day. I showed her my documentation, the flower-covered notebook with all her manipulations written down, and she read through it with tears streaming down her face. She said she did not even remember doing some of the things I had recorded, that there were whole conversations she had no recollection of, and I did not know if that was the disease or just denial, but either way it made everything more complicated. I explained to her what I had done to protect myself legally, how I had changed my will and set up the trust, and I told her I was not changing any of that back. I told her that protecting myself had to be my first priority, and I could not risk putting myself in a vulnerable position again, no matter what her medical situation was. Then I made her an offer. I told her I would help her, not by giving her control of my money, but by using some of my resources to make sure she got the best possible care as her disease progressed. I told her I would help her find specialists, research treatment options, set up a medical team. I told her I would make sure her children, my grandchildren, had support and counseling as they dealt with watching their mother decline. I told her I would be there, not as a victim of her manipulation, but as her mother, to help her face what was coming. But I also told her that David had to know the truth, that she could not keep lying to the people in her life, that if we were going to move forward, it had to be with complete honesty. Emily agreed. We called David that afternoon and told him everything. His reaction was complicated. Anger mixed with grief, mixed with fear for what the future held. They had a lot to work through, a lot of conversations to have about what their marriage would look like as Emily's condition worsened. But at least now, everything was out in the open. No more secrets, no more lies. Just the hard truth that sometimes life gives you impossible situations and you have to find a way to face them with whatever grace you can muster. That was 2 months ago. Emily started treatment with a neurologist who specializes in Huntington's disease. The tremors are being managed with medication. The cognitive symptoms are being monitored closely. She is in therapy to deal with the emotional weight of her diagnosis and the guilt of what she tried to do to me. We see each other every week, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for longer visits. The relationship is not what it was before. I do not know if it ever will be. There is a crack running through the foundation of our connection, and I am not sure it can be fully repaired. But we are trying. I have not changed my will. Everything still goes to charity, to organizations that prevent elder abuse and support people with Huntington's disease. Emily knows this, and she says she understands. I have set up a separate fund to help with her medical expenses as the disease progresses, money that goes directly to healthcare providers, not to her. I am helping in the ways I can help while still protecting myself. It is a delicate balance, and some days it feels impossible to maintain. Here is what I have learned from all of this. People are complicated. Hurt people hurt people. Fear makes us do terrible things. And sometimes the person trying to destroy you is also a victim of circumstances beyond their control. That does not make what they did right. It does not mean you have to forgive them or trust them again or put yourself in danger to help them. But it does mean that very few stories are as simple as good versus evil, victim versus villain, right versus wrong. Most of the time, we are all stumbling through the darkness, trying to survive our own private nightmares, and sometimes we crash into each other and cause damage we never meant to cause. I think about that $100,000 check I tore up in front of Emily. I think about the symbolism of that moment, the power I felt in destroying something she wanted so badly. And I wonder if I would make the same choice now, knowing what I know. Part of me says yes, Absolutely, because she needed to face consequences for her actions, and that moment of accountability was necessary. But another part of me wonders if I could have found a different way to set boundaries, a way that still protected me but did not come from a place of anger and hurt. I do not have an answer to that. Maybe there is no right answer. What I do know is that I am glad I found out the truth. I am glad I know about Emily's diagnosis. I am glad I had the chance to choose to help her from a place of strength, rather than having that help taken from me through manipulation. I am glad I documented everything and protected myself legally before I extended any kind of olive branch. And I am glad I am sharing this story with all of you, because maybe someone out there needs to hear that it is possible to set boundaries and still show compassion, to protect yourself and still offer help, to refuse to be a victim while acknowledging that the person who hurt you might also be suffering. If you have watched this whole story, if you have stayed with me through all the twists and turns and complicated truths, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community where we grapple with the messy reality of human relationships. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, I hope you will consider doing so now. Not because I need the numbers, but because these conversations matter, and I want to keep having them with people who understand that life is rarely simple. Click that subscribe button and join us for the next story. Leave a comment telling me what you think about this situation. Tell me if you would have made different choices. Tell me your own stories of family and betrayal and complicated love. Let us keep talking to each other, keep supporting each other, keep refusing to let age or illness or fear silence our voices. I will see you in the next video. Until then, remember that you are stronger than you think you are, braver than you believe, and deserving of dignity and respect, no matter what anyone else tries to take from you.